My father's name was George. He was the world's sweetest man. It would be not a contest, except that there was also my grandfather, who was the world's sweetest other man, the other world's sweetest man. And then there was my brother, who was the world's sweetest younger man. So I was kind of surrounded by three incredibly sweet, nurturing, loving men. I was not as nice as them growing up. You know, I was much more willing to fight the established order and much more willing to have to get my way. My father, my brother, and my grandfather were so easygoing. You know, it was just I used to look at them, and they weren't soft. They just were. They just really cared about other people being happy. I think I was much more selfish and self-centered growing up.
Right from the get-go?
Yeah, and it really revolved around sports. You know, sports was the only thing I cared about as a kid till about a month ago. That was really everything that mattered to me. No, but really that's what it was, and I was fiercely competitive to the point of, you know, if I lost a game in the park, just a pickup game, you know, I would replay that game at night. You know, it just was, I couldn't sleep that we had lost. And you know, my mother would never come to watch me play. I played all through high school and college, and she said, "I don't know who that boy is. That's not my son." And I said, "But, you know, we want to win." And she said, "Well, what about the mothers of the boys who lost?" Well, now you're throwing out competitive athletics. You know, someone's got to win, and I like to win. You know, if I was going to play, I wanted to win, and it really mattered to me. My brother and my father were probably better athletes, but more easygoing.
Where did you think that came from?
I have no idea. I think some of it may have come from my grandmother. My grandmother was the driving, dominant force in our family. She was a brilliant woman, never went a day of school in her life, you know. But she instinctively understood about power. It was really interesting, and she was really smart. For instance, she lived downstairs, so Grandma had a television set. We didn't have one. Grandma had a telephone. We didn't have one. I didn't have a telephone until I was, you know, like in junior high. And Grandma had a car, even though she didn't know how to drive. So if you wanted to go anywhere, learn anything, or talk to anybody, you had to go through her. And it was interesting. She just understood instinctively that these were things she needed to control. And then if you would go and say you got a phone call, you know, you would sit there and she would sit right across, right where you are, while you were on the phone. And it wasn't, you didn't have any cell phone or anywhere to go with it. And you just sit there and you go, "Grandma, can I have some privacy?" You know? And she would say, "Privacy? You need, what do you have, secrets from the family? Who are you, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg?" And I was so, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. And I thought, well, in case one of them got off posthumously on a technicality, you were still guilty for wanting privacy. So it was a very kind of overlapping communal culture that we lived in. There were no boundaries. There were absolutely no boundaries in Brooklyn. But what there was, and this was interesting trying to carry it over into the show business world, was there was real accountability. You were named and numbered. Everyone knew you. They knew your parents. They knew your brother. Your behavior was monitored, and there were certain things that the community, as a community, would feel was wrong. So if a guy saw you smoking, and another man came by, you were smoking, not that I ever smoked, but he would take the cigarette out of your mouth, smack you, and say, "If your father was here, this is what he would have done." So everybody felt they were all your parents, and we were all their children. So with it was that incredible love, but it was also kind of suffocating. And as you grew older and you wanted to move into other areas, it wasn't quite as tolerant. But you know, in those early years, it was wonderful to be so known and looked after. In terms of accountability, you could not just continue to be a bad person. Somebody would beat you up. You know, so somebody would come in, you can't do that. Either an older guy, somebody, you can't do that. You can't be that way. And I always thought in show business, we could use more of that, you know. Well, you can't be that way. I don't care how much money you're making, whatever, you know, that's not acceptable behavior for one human being and another, you know. So I think, in a way, the Family Ties set, where I was blessed to be with these wonderful actors and directors and people, but it really was like my schoolyard back in Brooklyn. You know, we had, no one raised their voice, there was no rudeness, everyone counted. The crew counted as much as anybody else. So you couldn't be rude to a crew member. There was just, that was our family, that was our schoolyard, that was our neighborhood, and you had to respect everyone in there. And you know, look, we were so lucky with Michael, especially, just that he didn't have an ounce of negative energy in him, you know. But it was interesting because I thought about it later, how much that came from Brooklyn. How those things are always the most important to me. The thing that would always get me most angry was lack of loyalty. when somebody tried to put themselves above the team, above the family, above the neighborhood. And I tried not to put myself above that. I like much more that collective relationship.